The palace of Zyphora stretched high into the sky, its silver spires glinting under the twin suns. From her private balcony, Princess Liara stared at the horizon, her mind clouded with worry. For as long as she could remember, she had lived under the strict rules of her family, never daring to question their decisions. Her world had always been defined by order, tradition, and a careful calculation of power. And now that world had shifted in a way she had never expected. She was to marry a human, a being from a distant planet called Earth. Liara had heard stories about humans since she was a child. They were reckless, stubborn, and unpredictable. The elders spoke of their wars and their impulsive decisions, and they warned that humans could not be trusted. The idea that one of them would enter the palace, that she would have to live with him, made her heart pound with fear. She had imagined every possible disaster. What if he disrespected her? What if he insulted her family? What if he was cruel? The possibilities seemed endless. The announcement had come weeks ago. Her father, King Thuron, had sent word that Captain Jalen Cross, a human diplomat and explorer, would arrive to formalize their engagement. The purpose was clear, an alliance between Zyphora and Earth. While the king celebrated the union as a triumph of diplomacy, Liara could not see it that way. To her, it was a trap. She was being forced to wed someone whose ways she could not understand, someone who belonged to a world so different from her own. She turned from the balcony just as the palace gates opened. A group of guards marched down the steps, and behind them a figure stepped into the sunlight. He was tall, with broad shoulders and an easy confidence in the way he moved. His dark hair was slightly messy, and his eyes, a deep brown, scanned the palace as if he were both curious and cautious. He carried himself with a sense of purpose, yet there was no arrogance in his posture. Liara felt a flicker of something she could not name. Her heart thumped faster, a mix of fear and curiosity. The human's presence was overwhelming, but there was something familiar in the way he carried himself, something almost human. She quickly looked away, refusing to let him see her gaze. The first meeting was arranged in the grand hall. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting refracted light across the polished floors. Nobles and dignitaries filled the room, their faces a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and excitement. Liara entered slowly, her gown flowing behind her, and the room seemed to hush as she moved toward the dais. Jalen stood waiting, his posture relaxed but attentive. When their eyes met, Liara felt a wave of tension wash over her. She had expected him to be brash, loud, or disrespectful. Instead, he inclined his head slightly, offering a polite smile. It was a small gesture, but it unsettled her. He did not try to dominate the room, nor did he act as if he were superior. He simply stood there, observing, listening, and waiting. "Princess Liara," Jalen said, his voice calm and steady, "it is an honor to meet you." She nodded, feeling the weight of every eye in the hall upon her. Her thoughts swirled. Could someone from Earth truly be this composed? Was he pretending, or was this the real him? She could not tell. The ceremony itself was brief, formal, and filled with the usual words of duty and obligation. They were pronounced as betrothed, bound together by the decree of their respective leaders. Liara felt a mixture of relief and dread. The ceremony was over, but the reality of living with this human was only just beginning. Over the next few days, Jalen was escorted through the palace and shown the rules of Zyphora. Liara observed him carefully. He did not make mistakes in protocol, nor did he seem intimidated by the grandeur of the palace. When a guard spoke in a language he did not understand, he smiled politely and waited for translation. When offered a ceremonial meal with unfamiliar foods, he sampled each item thoughtfully, nodding at the flavors rather than making jokes or complaints. Liara found herself watching him more than she wanted to admit. There was a quiet confidence in his actions, a patience that no Zyphoran noble had ever shown her. He did not try to impress her or assert his superiority. Instead, he respected the space around him, giving her distance while still showing attentiveness. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon, Liara walked along the palace gardens. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant sound of a fountain. She had hoped for a moment of solitude, but Jalen appeared at the far end of the path, as if drawn by the same desire for quiet. "Princess Liara," he said gently, "may I join you?" It was not fear exactly, though she was still cautious. It was curiosity, a desire to understand the man she had been told to fear. She nodded, and he fell into step beside her. For a while they walked in silence. Then Jalen spoke. "I know this is not easy for you. You've been told stories about humans, and I understand why you might be afraid. I want to know you, not just as a princess, but as a person." Over the next days, small interactions began to change her perception. When she entered the training halls, he observed silently, asking questions not to mock her abilities but to understand them. When servants fumbled in front of him, he offered encouragement rather than criticism. He respected the rules of Zyphora, but was not bound by the fear that gripped the palace. Liara found herself drawn to his presence. She could not deny that her fear was slowly giving way to curiosity. The human was nothing like she had imagined. He was patient, thoughtful, and capable of action when it mattered. And most importantly, he treated her with respect, never pressing, never demanding, always allowing her the freedom to make her own choices. One afternoon, a sudden commotion erupted in the palace. A minor accident in the kitchens had caused a small fire to break out. Panic spread among the staff, and for a moment, Liara felt the familiar grip of fear tightening around her chest. But Jalen acted quickly. He directed the kitchen staff to contain the flames, guided the guards to safety, and even carried a fallen servant to a secure area. His actions were calm, precise, and courageous. Liara watched, astonished. No Zyphoran noble had ever taken charge like this in an emergency. They often issued orders from a safe distance, caring more about appearances than the people themselves. Jalen risked himself to save others, and in that moment, Liara realized that humans could be brave in ways her own people were not. That evening, as she sat alone in her chambers, Liara reflected on the past few days. Her fear had not disappeared entirely, but it had shifted. She no longer saw Jalen as a threat. She saw him as someone she could learn from, someone whose presence challenged her assumptions and made her consider a world beyond the rigid walls of tradition. A quiet hope began to grow inside her, fragile but persistent. Perhaps this union would not be as terrible as she had imagined. Perhaps in time she could even trust this human, this stranger from a distant planet, with her heart and her future. The twin moons of Zyphora rose high in the night sky, casting silver light over the palace gardens. Liara walked to her balcony once more, gazing at the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, humans and Zyphorans could coexist. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would find that her fear had been the first step toward something greater than she had ever imagined. As the night deepened, she felt a faint but undeniable shift in herself. Fear had once dominated her thoughts, dictating every action and decision. But now, curiosity and cautious hope had begun to take root. The human she had been forced to wed was unlike anyone she had known, and for the first time in her life, Liara wondered what it would be like to truly see another being, not as a duty, not as a threat, but as a partner. And far away, in the quiet of his own room, Jalen Cross looked at a small hollow map of Zyphora and thought the same thing. He did not yet understand all of the customs or the challenges that awaited him, but he had already begun to see the spark of courage, intelligence, and heart in the princess. He was meant to wed. He knew that this journey would not be easy, but he also knew that it was worth every risk. In the heart of a distant galaxy, two worlds had collided. One was filled with tradition and caution, the other with curiosity and daring. And in that collision, something new was beginning, a bond that neither fear nor distance could easily break. The palace of Zyphora had never seen such a tense morning. The twin suns rose slowly over the horizon, casting long shadows across the spires and courtyards. Birds chirped in the gardens, unaware of the storm that was quietly approaching, but inside the palace, worry clung to every corridor. Liara walked through the halls, her mind restless. The events of the previous days still lingered in her thoughts. Captain Jalen Cross, the human she had been forced to marry, had proven himself capable, patient, and brave. Yet she still struggled to reconcile her growing admiration with the fear that had haunted her since childhood. As she entered the training halls, she found Jalen waiting. He had been observing the palace guards' drills and the cadets' exercises. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the movements of the trainees. When he noticed Liara, he offered a nod and a faint smile. "Good morning, Princess," he said, his voice calm. "Are you joining me today?" Instead, he offered guidance, encouragement, and respect. Slowly, she nodded. Together, they moved through the exercises. Jalen demonstrated techniques and strategies, not with force but with patience. He encouraged Liara to try her own approaches, praising her ingenuity even when her attempts faltered. For the first time, she felt that her abilities were recognized for their own merit, not simply as part of her royal title. As they trained, the sky above began to change. Dark clouds crept across the horizon, moving faster than usual. A chill swept through the palace, and the sound of distant thunder rumbled across the gardens. The twins' suns were still visible, but their light was dimmed by the growing storm. "Storm," Jalen said quietly, observing the clouds. "And not just any storm. This could become dangerous." She realized that while she feared the unknown, he seemed to understand it, capable of predicting and preparing for it. By the time the storm struck, the palace was buzzing with activity. Alarms echoed through the halls, and the servants hurried to secure windows and doors. The winds howled, and flashes of lightning lit up the sky. The palace trembled under the force of the storm, and fear gripped the hearts of many. Jalen moved quickly, issuing orders with precision. He guided the staff to reinforce vulnerable sections of the palace, ensured the residents were safe, and even helped secure important documents and treasures. His calm and methodical approach contrasted sharply with the panic that surrounded him. Liara watched from a balcony, fear gripping her once more, but also a strange sense of awe. When a tree near the palace courtyard fell under the storm's force, threatening to collapse a portion of the wall, Jalen acted without hesitation. He ran into the courtyard, coordinating the guards to move debris and secure the area. Liara felt her heart pound in her chest as she realized the human was risking himself to protect others. He did not do it for glory or recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do. After hours of chaos, the storm began to subside. The palace had survived, though not without damage. Fallen branches littered the grounds, windows were cracked, and some sections of the outer walls had been weakened. But the people were safe, thanks in large part to Jalen's leadership. Liara descended into the courtyard, her feet careful on the debris-strewn ground. She found Jalen helping a young servant carry a broken beam to a safe location. His clothes were damp and torn from the wind, but his focus remained steady, his energy unwavering. "You didn't have to do all of this yourself," she said softly, approaching him. Jalen shook his head. "Some things cannot wait. Lives are more important than appearances or protocol. You have to understand that, Princess. Emergencies do not respect rank or title." The days that followed were filled with rebuilding. Jalen worked alongside the Zyphoran staff, offering ideas to strengthen the palace and improve emergency preparedness. He consulted the engineers, trained the guards, and even helped organize supplies for the palace kitchens. His presence was steady, a constant reassurance that even in the face of chaos, there was a way forward. Liara found herself drawn into his work. At first, she observed quietly, hesitant to interfere. But as she saw his respect for her opinions and his patience in teaching her, she began to contribute her own ideas. She suggested ways to reinforce the palace walls, using knowledge of structural weaknesses only someone familiar with Zyphoran architecture could know. Jalen listened intently, nodding at her observations, sometimes asking questions that pushed her to think more deeply. In those moments, Liara realized something profound. This human did not see her as fragile or incapable. He valued her intelligence and judgment, and he treated her as a partner, not a child or a prize. The fear that had dominated her thoughts for so long began to ebb, replaced by a cautious sense of trust. One evening, as they reviewed the plans for a new section of the palace defenses, Liara noticed a change in herself. She spoke confidently, offering suggestions and strategies, and Jalen listened without interruption. When she hesitated, unsure if her ideas were practical, he encouraged her gently, reminding her that mistakes were part of learning. For the first time, Liara felt that she had a voice that mattered, that her perspective could influence outcomes in a meaningful way. She looked at Jalen, realizing that the human had given her more than guidance. He had given her confidence, a sense of agency she had never experienced before. The next morning, the palace received urgent news. Scouts reported that a meteor storm was approaching the planet, larger and more dangerous than any recorded in Xiforan history. Panic spread quickly and the palace staff began to prepare for evacuation. Liara felt a flicker of fear, but she also felt a strange steadiness. Jalen was by her side, calmly assessing the situation and organizing the response. "Princess," he said, his voice firm but reassuring, "we need to act quickly. The safety of the people comes first. We will work together, and we will make it through this." As the meteor storm descended, fiery rocks streaked across the sky, and the ground shook with each impact. Buildings trembled, and the air was filled with dust and debris. Jalen moved tirelessly, directing efforts to secure damaged areas, rescue trapped workers, and maintain order. Liara followed his lead, using her knowledge of the palace to guide people to safety and calm their fears. Hours passed and the storm raged on, but slowly their efforts began to show results. Injured workers were cared for, collapsed structures were stabilized, and the chaos began to subside. Liara watched Jalen as he directed a group of guards to reinforce a vulnerable wall. Despite exhaustion, he remained focused, calm, and determined. In that moment, Liara understood something she had never realized before. Humans were not reckless or dangerous by nature. They were capable of extraordinary courage, of acting with intelligence and care even in the most dire circumstances. Jalen was living proof of that truth, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration for him. When the storm finally passed, the palace was battered but intact. Liara and Jalen walked through the gardens, surveying the damage and checking on the staff. The air was thick with dust and the smell of scorched wood, but the people were safe. Liara felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. "Thank you," she said softly, turning to Jalen. "I don't know how we could have managed without you." For the first time, she did not fear the human she had been forced to marry. Instead, she felt respect, trust, and a quiet admiration that began to grow into something deeper. As night fell and the twin moons rose over the palace, Liara stood on her balcony once more, looking at the stars. She thought of Earth, of the human who had changed her perspective, and of the possibilities that lay ahead. Fear had once defined her, but now curiosity, trust, and hope had taken root. Somewhere in the galaxy, a human and a princess had begun to understand each other. The bond they were forming was built not on duty alone, but on courage, respect, and shared experience. And as Liara watched the stars, she knew that this was only the beginning. The palace of Xiphora was quieter than usual the morning after the meteor storm. The damage had been repaired, but the air was thick with tension. Liara moved through the halls, her steps measured. The storm had tested her courage and skill, and she had surprised herself by acting decisively when it mattered. Yet a lingering unease remained. She had a feeling that not all challenges came from nature. Some were born of human, or in this case, Xiphoran deception. As she walked toward the council chambers, Liara noticed Jalen waiting for her. He stood near the entrance, reviewing a set of holomaps of the city and surrounding areas. His face was serious, his eyes focused, but there was a quiet patience in the way he waited for her. "Princess," he said as she approached, "I need to discuss something important with you. It's not about the storm. Something else is happening, something I believe you need to see." She had trusted him in matters of survival and safety, and now he spoke of a hidden threat. She nodded, and together they entered a private chamber where the palace security reports were displayed on a large hollow screen. Jalen pointed to several unusual messages intercepted by the palace intelligence. These messages suggest a conspiracy within the court. Some nobles are unhappy with your father's decisions, and they see the human alliance as a weakness. They're planning to exploit it, perhaps even sabotage your marriage to gain power. Secret meetings, unexplained transfers of resources, and coded warnings, all signs of plotting. "Who?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We don't know all of them yet," Jalen admitted. "But we can track patterns and behaviors. I want you to help me. You know the palace better than anyone. Your insight could reveal who is truly loyal and who is plotting against us." She had never been trained in espionage or strategy in the political sense. Her life had been controlled by rules, not by initiative or careful planning. But Jalen's calm presence reminded her that she was not alone. She nodded. "I'll do what I can." She observed court activities, noting suspicious interactions, overheard conversations, and subtle gestures that indicated hidden alliances. Jalen taught her to analyze information without jumping to conclusions, to use logic and deduction alongside intuition. In one instance, a court official delivered a message that seemed routine but contained subtle inconsistencies. Liara noticed the hesitation in his tone and the careful wording that suggested secrecy. Jalen guided her through decoding the message, pointing out details she might have overlooked. Step by step, they pieced together a network of nobles who were discontented with the royal family and the human alliance. Their investigations led them to a secluded wing of the palace where secret meetings had been held. Hidden passages, forgotten for decades, allowed the conspirators to move unseen. Liara's knowledge of the palace layout proved invaluable, and Jalen marveled at her keen memory and intuition. "You see things no one else notices," he said one evening, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. Liara felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. For the first time, she realized that her abilities were not just recognized, they were essential. Jalen did not treat her as fragile or unimportant. He treated her as a partner, someone whose contributions could make a difference. It was an empowering feeling, one that made her chest swell with quiet determination. One night, as they reviewed their findings in the privacy of Jalen's quarters, Liara discovered a coded message that revealed the next step of the conspirators' plan. They intended to sabotage the upcoming diplomatic ceremony, an event designed to solidify the alliance between Zyphora and Earth. The chaos would create fear, weaken the royal family, and allow the disloyal nobles to seize power. Liara's hands shook as she read the message. "If this happens, the people could be in danger, and my father, he would be vulnerable." Liara would observe the palace under the guise of preparing for the ceremony, while Jalen coordinated with the loyal guards and palace staff. They would intercept the conspirators without exposing themselves or alarming the innocent. As the day of the ceremony approached, tension filled the air. The palace was a blend of elegance and nervous energy. Guests from distant planets arrived, their alien appearances and exotic attire adding to the vibrant spectacle. Liara moved gracefully among them, all the while keeping her eyes and ears open for anything unusual. Jalen stayed slightly behind, observing from a distance, always ready to act if necessary. His calm presence reassured her, giving her the confidence to act decisively. She began to recognize subtle signs, whispered conversations that ended abruptly when she approached, glances exchanged between courtiers, and small movements that indicated hidden intentions. Finally, the moment arrived. Liara discreetly followed one of the suspicious nobles into a corridor that led to a hidden chamber. There, she discovered a group of conspirators preparing to tamper with the ceremonial devices that would be used during the diplomatic event. Her heart pounded, but she steadied herself. Using the knowledge she had gained from Jalen and her own careful observations, Liara devised a subtle distraction. She signaled a nearby guard under the pretense of an urgent message. The guard intercepted the conspirators, giving Liara the chance to secure the chamber and prevent any sabotage. When she rejoined Jalen, he gave her a rare smile, full of genuine pride. "You did it," he said simply. "You saw what needed to be done and acted without hesitation. That is courage." The conspirators were exposed and removed from positions of power, their plans thwarted by the combined efforts of Liara and Jalen. The palace staff and guests marveled at the seamless handling of the crisis, unaware of the danger that had been narrowly avoided. After the event, Liara and Jalen walked through the palace gardens, reflecting on the events of the past weeks. The gardens were peaceful, bathed in the soft light of the twin moons. Liara felt a sense of calm that had been absent for much of her life. "Today was frightening," she admitted softly, "but it was also enlightening. I never realized I could do something like that." Courage is not the absence of fear, it is acting despite it. In the days that followed, Liara and Jalen continued to work together. They strengthened palace defenses, organized training for the guards, and improved communication between the royal family and their allies. Their collaboration became a symbol of unity and trust, demonstrating that humans and Xiphorans could work together to face challenges greater than either could handle alone. Liara began to see the human not as a stranger or a threat, but as a partner and a guide. She realized that fear had once limited her, keeping her from fully understanding the world and the people around her. Now, with Jalen by her side, she felt capable of facing any challenge, whether from nature, political intrigue, or the unknown reaches of space. One night as they stood on the palace balcony, Liara looked at the stars. The galaxy seemed vast and endless, full of mysteries and possibilities. She thought of Earth, of the human who had changed her perception, and of the journey that lay ahead. The storms, conspiracies, and challenges had tested her courage, but they had also revealed her strength and potential. Jalen stood beside her, silent but supportive. His presence reminded her that she was not alone, that partnership and trust could make even the most daunting tasks possible. Liara realized that she had begun to feel something she had never felt before, confidence in herself, in her abilities, and in the human who had once seemed so frightening. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but Liara no longer felt powerless. She had faced danger, deception, and fear, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain of her own capabilities. And with Jalen by her side, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time, Liara looked at the future with hope, knowing that courage, trust, and partnership could overcome even the greatest challenges. The palace of Xiphora had settled into a calm rhythm after the chaos of storms and conspiracies. The halls were filled with the quiet hum of everyday life, servants moving about their duties, guards patrolling with watchful eyes, and nobles preparing for ceremonies and events. Yet for Liara, the calm was different now. It was not the usual oppressive quiet of duty and expectation. It was a quiet she could inhabit, a space where she could think, plan, and even breathe. Liara wandered through the palace gardens, enjoying the soft light of the twin moons as they rose in the night sky. The gardens had been her refuge since childhood, a place of solitude where she could escape the pressures of court life. But now, she realized she was not alone. Jalen had begun to accompany her during her walks, not out of obligation but out of a quiet desire to understand the world she inhabited. "You seem different," Jalen said softly, breaking the silence. His voice carried a warmth that was gentle but firm. "More confident, I think, stronger." "I suppose the past weeks have changed me," she admitted. I never thought I could act with courage or make decisions that mattered, but I did." His words were sincere, and she realized that he did not say them lightly. He saw her as she was, not as a princess or a title, but as a person capable of thought, action, and growth. It was a sensation she had never experienced before, a feeling of being understood and respected. As the days passed, their partnership deepened. They spent time walking through the gardens, discussing palace matters, and observing the people around them. Jalen taught Liara strategies for negotiation and problem-solving, while she shared her knowledge of court politics and Xiforan culture. Each lesson was mutual, a blend of learning and teaching that strengthened both of them. One afternoon, they came upon a group of palace gardeners struggling to repair a damaged fountain. Liara instinctively moved to help, but Jalen shook his head. "Let's observe first," he said. "Sometimes the solution is in understanding, not rushing." Jalen pointed out structural weaknesses and suggested techniques she had never considered. Slowly, they guided the gardeners to repair the fountain efficiently, preventing further damage. Liara laughed softly as the water began to flow smoothly again. "I never thought fixing a fountain could be so satisfying," she said. Jalen chuckled. "It's about perspective. Even small victories matter. They teach patience, observation, and the value of teamwork." Jalen listened with patience, never dismissing her ideas, always valuing her perspective. One evening, they sat on the balcony, watching the twin moons rise over the palace. The sky was clear, and the stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across the cosmos. Liara felt a sense of peace she had never known. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "if humans and Xiforans can truly understand each other? Not just work together, but really understand?" She realized that trust had become the foundation of their relationship. It was not built on fear or duty, but on respect, understanding, and shared experience. For the first time, she felt the possibility of a bond that was real and meaningful. Their growing connection did not go unnoticed. The palace staff observed the way Liara and Jalen moved together, how their interactions were marked by mutual respect rather than formality. Even the nobles, who had once whispered about the human's presence with skepticism, began to see that his influence was stabilizing, not disruptive. One day, a visiting diplomat from a neighboring system arrived. He was known for his cunning and shrewdness, often testing the patience and skill of those he met. Liara and Jalen were tasked with hosting him, ensuring that the diplomatic meeting went smoothly. As they prepared, Liara felt a mixture of nervousness and confidence. She had never dealt with diplomats of such skill, but with Jalen at her side, she felt ready. When the meeting began, the diplomat attempted subtle manipulations, probing for weaknesses in their alliance. Jalen responded calmly, addressing the points with logic and clarity. Liara added insights from her knowledge of court politics, anticipating questions and providing information that reinforced their position. Together, they navigated the conversation with precision and poise, impressing the diplomat and solidifying their credibility. After the diplomat left, Liara turned to Jalen, relief and pride mingling in her expression. "We did it," she said softly. Jalen smiled, his eyes warm. "We did, and you led as much as I did. That is something you should never forget." She had faced fear, challenge, and responsibility, and she had succeeded. The human she had once feared had shown her not only trust and respect, but also the strength she possessed within herself. As the days continued, they found moments of quiet intimacy and shared experiences. They walked through the palace gardens at dawn, watched the twin suns rise together, and shared stories of their lives. Liara spoke of her childhood, her fears, and her dreams. Jalen shared tales of Earth, his family, and the lessons he had learned in his travels across the stars. Through these conversations, Liara discovered that humans, like Xiforans, had their own struggles and triumphs. She realized that courage, kindness, and understanding were not limited by species, but by the willingness to act with heart and integrity. One evening, they found themselves near a quiet fountain in the garden. The water reflected the stars above, creating a shimmering tapestry of light. Liara sat on the edge, her thoughts wandering. "Jalen," she said softly, "I used to fear humans. I thought they were reckless and dangerous. But now I see something different. I see strength, courage, and kindness. And I see that you trust me, even when you could have led alone. That is why I respect you." In the following days, their bond continued to grow. They worked together to plan palace events, train the guards, and organize defenses for potential threats. Liara found herself seeking Jalen's counsel on matters that once would have filled her with anxiety. His guidance was steady, his patience unwavering, and his respect for her insights deepened her own sense of self-worth. One afternoon, while walking through the palace gardens, Liara paused to admire the beauty of the alien flora. Jalen watched her, noticing the way her eyes lit up at the sight of a rare flower. "You see beauty in things others might overlook," he said softly. Liara smiled, touched by his observation. "I suppose I have learned to notice it. Maybe because I finally feel safe enough to look." Now she experienced partnership, trust, and the quiet thrill of being seen for who she truly was. As night fell and the palace settled into silence, Liara and Jalen stood together on the balcony, gazing at the stars. The twin moons cast a silver glow over the gardens, and the air was filled with the soft whisper of the wind. Liara realized that her fear had been replaced not by certainty, but by hope. Hope that she could face challenges, navigate political intrigue, and even form a bond with someone from a world she had once feared. And with Jalen by her side, she felt capable of achieving all of it. In that moment, Liara understood the true power of partnership. It was not just about surviving storms or thwarting conspiracies. It was about trust, respect, and the courage to act with heart. And in that understanding, she felt a quiet but unwavering strength, ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store for her. The palace of Zyphora shone under the light of the twin suns, its spires reflecting the brilliance of a new day. The city had recovered from storms, conspiracies, and fear, and life moved forward with renewed energy. For Liara, the princess who had once trembled at the thought of a human by her side, the days now felt different. She walked the halls with purpose, her mind alert, her heart steady. She had learned to trust, to act, and to lead, and she had discovered that strength often came from unexpected places. Jalen Cross moved beside her as they inspected the training grounds. The guards practiced formations and drills, their movements precise and disciplined. Liara watched closely, noting their strengths and areas for improvement. Jalen observed as well, occasionally offering suggestions but always deferring to her knowledge of Zyphoran systems. The balance between them had grown seamless. They were partners in every sense, their strengths complementing one another. "You have changed the palace, Liara," Jalen said quietly, his eyes scanning the grounds. "Not just the structures or the defenses, but the spirit of the people. They trust you, and they trust me because they trust you. And courage, partnership, and trust are the rest." And while she had not yet admitted it fully, a quiet warmth had grown in her heart, a recognition of the human not only as a partner in duty, but as someone who could share her life. The royal council had called for a ceremony to celebrate the stabilization of the palace and the success of the alliance with Earth. Nobles, dignitaries, and representatives from distant worlds gathered to witness the event. Liara moved through the preparations with calm confidence, her eyes bright, her posture assured. She had learned to navigate the complexities of leadership, balancing tradition with pragmatism, ceremony with action. Jalen stayed close, not as a protector but as a companion and advisor. He had proven his wisdom, courage, and empathy countless times, and the court had begun to see him not as an outsider, but as an ally. The bond between them was evident to all who observed them, a partnership built on respect, understanding, and shared purpose. As the ceremony began, Liara and Jalen stood side by side, facing the assembly. The air was filled with anticipation, The voices of the crowd hushed as the royal heralds announced the proceedings. Liara's heart was steady, her mind focused. She knew that today was not only a celebration of political alliance, but also a testament to the journey she had undertaken. The journey from fear to trust, from doubt to confidence, from isolation to partnership. The ceremonial words were spoken, and the alliance between Zyphora and Earth was formally recognized. Applause echoed through the hall, and Liara felt a wave of pride. The humans in attendance nodded with respect, acknowledging the role that Jalen had played in making this moment possible. And Liara realized that their success was not due solely to titles or duty, but to the collaboration, courage, and mutual respect that she and Jalen had cultivated. After the formalities, Liara and Jalen stepped into the palace gardens. The light of the twin moons shimmered across the water of the fountains, casting a serene glow over the lush greenery. For a moment the weight of ceremony, duty, and expectation faded, leaving only quiet reflection. "You have grown into your own strength," Jalen said softly, turning to her. "Not just as a princess, but as a leader, a strategist, and someone who can face the unknown with courage. I am proud to stand beside you. You showed me that humans are not to be feared but understood. That courage and kindness can exist together, and that trust is a gift, not a weakness." For the first time, Liara felt that she could truly see the human beside her, not as a stranger, not as an obligation, but as someone who shared her values, her purpose, and her future. The days that followed were filled with meaningful collaboration. Liara worked with her council to implement new reforms, ensuring that the palace defenses, emergency systems, and diplomatic protocols were strengthened. Jalen provided insights from his experience across human civilizations, offering innovative ideas while respecting Xyphoran traditions. Together, they built a system that was both efficient and compassionate, practical and fair. Liara noticed that the people of Zyphora responded to this partnership with renewed hope. The staff and guards were motivated, the nobles more cooperative, and the citizens inspired by the example of leadership that combined strength, wisdom, and empathy. Liara felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced. She had discovered her own power, her own voice, and her own ability to shape the future. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the palace grounds, Liara turned to Jalen. "Do you think that we can truly make a difference together, not just for the palace but for the people, and maybe even beyond Zyphora? The galaxy is vast, and there will always be challenges, but we have proven that trust, courage, and partnership can overcome them. Together, we can face anything." She knew that the future, whatever it held, could be faced with courage and grace. As the twin moons reflected off the palace fountains, Liara and Jalen shared a moment of quiet understanding. Words were unnecessary. The trust and connection between them spoke louder than anything else. The human she had once feared had become a partner, a guide, and perhaps something more, a companion in the journey of life and leadership. In the days that followed, they continued to strengthen their bond. Liara took on new responsibilities with confidence, knowing that Jalen's support and respect were steadfast. Jalen, in turn, continued to learn from her wisdom, her intuition, and her understanding of Zyphoran culture. Together, they became not only partners in duty, but partners in life, a team capable of facing political intrigue, natural disasters, and the unknown reaches of space. The palace thrived under their leadership. Citizens looked to the princess and the human with admiration, inspired by the example of collaboration and courage. Liara felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond personal achievement. She knew that the work she and Jalen had done would leave a lasting impact on Zyphora and its people. One quiet night, Liara and Jalen stood on the balcony, gazing at the stars. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, filled with possibilities, challenges, and mysteries. Liara realized that she had come a long way from the fearful girl who had once dreaded the arrival of a human. She had discovered strength, trust, and hope. She had learned that partnership and respect could transform fear into courage, and that the human she had been forced to wed was someone she could rely on, admire, and even care for deeply. "Jalen," she said softly, "thank you for showing me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it, for showing me that trust can change everything, and for showing me that partnership can be stronger than any obstacle." She no longer feared the unknown. She no longer doubted her own abilities, and she no longer questioned the value of the human beside her. They had faced storms, conspiracies, and uncertainty together, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. The palace of Zyphora glowed in the night, a symbol of resilience, partnership, and hope. And in the hearts of Liara and Jalen, a bond had formed that transcended fear, expectation, and tradition, a bond built on trust, courage, and the quiet power of understanding. As they looked out at the galaxy, the stars stretching endlessly before them, Liara realized that this was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid. She had a partner, a guide, and a friend who respected her, believed in her, and shared her vision. Together, they would face the future, not as separate worlds, but as a united force capable of courage, compassion, and hope. In that moment, under the twin moons of Zyphora, Liara understood the truth that had been unfolding since Jalen first arrived. The human she had feared had become someone who treated her with respect, inspired her courage, and showed her that the greatest strength lies not in titles or power, but in trust, partnership, and the willingness to face the unknown together. The galaxy was vast, full of mysteries and challenges, but Liara no longer felt small or powerless. With Jalen by her side, she knew they could face anything. Together, they would lead, protect, and inspire, leaving a legacy of courage, hope, and partnership that would endure across worlds and generations. And for Liara, the princess who had once feared the human she was forced to wed, a new chapter had begun. A chapter filled with trust, understanding, and the quiet, enduring power of human heart and spirit.